if you may have noticed, I have got a sword. That is straight up old school Italian supercar building right there. What's up, people? It is New Year's Day 2021, which is going to be a fantastic year. But in all honesty, it could be just as big or bigger of a dumpster fire than last year in many ways. But I think it's going to be a fantastic year because we've at least got the car world and lots of fun and builds to come up. So here is the King Zero build. I'm feeling good about it because I'm starting to do the sheet metal work out of it. Now I'm doing it in 20 gauge steel. And today I'm going to show you how I do that. We're going to do some paper templates. We're going to cut out some steel. We're going to roll it. We're going to hammer it. We're going to weld it. We're going to grind it. We're going to do man stuff. Yes. Okay. Now, if you may have noticed, I have got a sword in my hand, which actually this one would be called a rapier, and is from approximately 1640 in Toledo, Spain. Now, that's all fancy and good, having an actual antiquities from the 17th century. But the reason I bring this up, and I think it's fascinating, is the modern day car world, especially exotic cars and our street cars and our building and our hot rod scene and everything about that, basically exactly kind of parallels swordsmiths at different times in history. You know, if you look at more of a Renaissance time in Europe, and maybe in some ways feudal Japan, but that's a whole different story. And frankly, feudal Japan is not my forte for knowing much about it. I'm more into European stuff. Basically, if you were carrying a sword and dueling, and that was your way of showing social class and defending yourself and sport and, you know, basically just warring with the Joneses, that's exactly what cars are today, especially things like this. And why I think the Zero is interesting, and I wanted to bring it up kind of like this is, see, nowadays, any idiot with a bunch of money or has a good enough credit rating can go out and sign some paperwork and make some payments and get an exotic car that somebody else built in a factory far, far away. That's really lame. I think this was back in the day, and you did that with swords. Everybody that was good and could make them and was better at fencing would make fun of those people. Exactly the same way that I make fun of the people with exotic cars and flappy paddle gearboxes today, because they're just a bunch of people with no talent that like to flex on social media and feel good about themselves, or maybe build a big YouTube channel and jack with the cops to get views, all of which I think are really lame. So I like building things. I like the talent of actually getting to drive it. But really, you know, this parallels swords and sport from many years ago. So let's put this away and think about something else, although I'm being basically a 10-year-old boy here and having fun with a sword now. So next week, right now, let's get at this, the King Zero build. But next week, I'm going to do a video, and I'm going to show you guys the sports that I especially like fencing and antiquities and some other things that I think you guys will find unusual. And I want to talk about them because I think that if you guys are wondering, what the heck is Casey Putsch all about? What are these weird chips on his shoulders that I don't understand? I think you will when we talk about sport and relate that to cars. So enough of this. So the Zero here, the King Zero, I'm making out of 20 gauge steel, which is pretty thin. Here it is. This is 20 gauge steel. It's not of a metallurgy that's super hard. It's pretty thin. And I know there's going to be some trolls. Casey, why are you being a terrible role model and holding sheet metal with your bare hands? Durr. Because I know how to. And yeah, it's sharp. If I go like that, I'm going to cut myself. So how about I just don't? Okay. But some of you have noticed that this panel here, I made out of 16 gauge steel, which is quite a lot thicker, but this one potentially will be stepped on or somebody will trip when they're getting in the car, so I wanted to make this thicker. But the 16 gauge steel is nice because it's very this 20 gauge is very formable, and even with a piece like this, I can just bend this with my bare hands. You know what I mean? So I'm going to show you guys this because, and it's of a soft metallurgy, a soft alloy, that when you heat it and you weld it and you grind it and you tap it with a hammer, you can form it and give those beautiful subtle curves that you'd seen on cars gone by of the past, vintage cars, whether they're made in Italy or England with different techniques. But the thing that's been exciting for me about this is the way I'm building this with a wire buck, that's the wire form here, is very similar, if not identical in many ways, to how the Italians would build cars, especially in the 50s and 60s, of course, Maserati, Ferrari, Lamborghini, things like that. And what's been fun, especially since I'm trying to model the style of this with regard to kind of the Italian flair and style of the time period of the 60s to early 70s, while I'm making it with basically the same techniques and just really vibing and getting into it, it feels like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like back in the day when I used to work on Ferraris, as a mechanic and Maseratis and stuff, I'm like, this is exactly the same stuff. I'm just doing it again. And it's really cool. So let's do it together. Okay, you guys, I have got things set up and I have changed into my welding zoot suit from Miller. It's cool. Anyway, right here you can see I just started tacking on this piece of metal that you saw me kind of bending and playing with, this 20 gauge steel. Now, let's talk about how I've decided to do this car and what's going well, what's going kind of meh, and what I'm going to change and hopefully get better at. So the other thing I have to point out is thank you for being patient with me. I have nobody here helping me, and I have to have this video out in, I don't know, a few hours. So doing the best I can. Hope you guys like it. Anyway, this is the panel I did just the other day, and it's nicely formed. It's got a bit of a compound curve, so it's not dead flat. It actually comes out with a real subtle, nice, gentle thing. Now, what I am doing with this car is all of the wire form that you guys can see represents all of the edges in space of the car where there's a fold in the metal. Now, with a lot of cars that people coach build, whether they're making like a Ferrari or Aston Martin looking kind of thing from the 50s or something, those edges, they'll actually form in the metal and then put down and then weld the metal together, and it'll sit over a wire buck. So what I'm doing is kind of a funky blend. And the reason being is, one, the main reason of it is I know it's like executable, if that makes sense. Like, I know I'll be able to do it and make it work. It just may require a little extra work in some ways. So as an example, the wire form, as you guys can kind of see right here, some of these pieces, like this one and this one that are now painted, those were support for the corner of the wire form right here. However, if you look at this wire right here, this is now part of the body of the car. This is 20 gauge steel, and you can see the gentle hammer marks here from where I was forming it just a little extra, or there was a little bit of warping where there was a tack, and I had to tap that back out. So you can see how that creates that nice rolled edge here. Now, typically with the Italians back in the day, what they would do, if they're doing an aluminum body, they would have a steel buck or a steel wire form, and then the aluminum, they, like for instance, where the wheel well is, right here, they would bring the aluminum over and they would literally just hammer it and roll it over the edge of the aluminum. And that's how they would do it. Now you guys can imagine those Italian cars from like the 50s and 60s that were built like that, or your English ones or wherever, yeah, they're gonna rust. You put aluminum and steel together like that, and it's issues. But they were hand formed back when to be race cars because it's kind of a quick and it's a nice thing. So this is gonna be all steel. Certainly with this, like down in the cracks and stuff, I'm gonna have to do a real good job of getting some paint and corrosion protection in there. But let's be honest, is this gonna sit out in the elements? I don't think so. So here's what I'm doing. That is my piece of 20 gauge right here. It was gently rolled, has just the slightest bit of a curve to it. And I am cutting it and trimming it and tacking it in place so it's getting welded all the edges, and then also is being welded to the seam here, which will, frankly, and I know there's jokes about, I can't remember, there's some like joke saying about if you're a crappy welder, just be a grinder, or like grinding makes me the welder that I ain't, or something like that, you guys know. But so angle grinder here with a 36 grit or 40 grit wheel is what I utilize to then smooth out the steel, like right here. And this obviously will go slightly over top of that, so then I'll come behind it with my body hammer here, okay? And then if I need some inertia, I'll hold it with a dolly type thing on the other side and tap it out smooth, hit it with the, buzzing it with the angle grinder with the sander on it, and that makes it smooth. So you can see right here, now this is quick, just getting the body on, but you can see this bend right here. That was a welded area and then smoothed out. Now I got a little thin here, so I got to kind of re-weld that, and I may touch that up with a TIG welder. But otherwise it's pretty darn good. And it's got that nice subtle compound curve going on. Got a little work to do here. But keep in mind that this is darn close and is only going to need like the tiniest amount of filler. By the way, stop using the word Bondo for all filler. Bondo is a company that are most well known for a filler that frankly isn't all that great. So it's a filler, two-part filler you're gonna do. So we'll get to that process. So I'm gonna put this thing on a tripod and show you what I'm doing. As another note, Right now I'm MIG welding, okay? I'm MIG welding steel, and there's a number of reasons for that. Now, a bunch of people out there who don't know how to weld, and a lot that do and are total snobs, like, you have to TIG, 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 I'm so special and fancy, stack quarters. Shut up. Okay, first of all, MIG works great. Now, the reason this is fantastic for what I'm doing right now is there's my ground, and I can just come up here with one hand, set the settings on that welding machine real nice, and tack it. It doesn't require two hands and a torch and a hand controller and filler rod and everything like that. So I can just go tack it, tack it, tack it, tack it. Now you gotta be really smart, because when you put enough heat into this rod, like if I just pour a ton of heat right into this rod right here, it'll actually bend down, because you'll have the expanding metal and it'll bend. It's the stupidest thing. So you've got to put the heat in it smoothly, and you can't really start laying in a lot more heat until you get to a place that's just rock solid and isn't gonna warp. So when it's delicate, you really gotta do that. So let me do the tripod thing. Okay guys, so let me grab the camera. We're gonna look at it here together. So you can get a pretty good look now. Here is the metal that is now welded and buzzed down. This is the quick, this is getting it close. Now truthfully speaking, if this is all I did for the whole car and put it together, I could just kind of tap on where, this is killing my chin and stuff. Okay, I could just tap on some places like this, smooth it out, and this already, I'll be honest, is good enough to go ahead and clean the surface, prime it, put a thin skim coat on it, and then these edges and stuff that aren't perfect right now will be perfect with the tiniest amount of sanding. I mean, we're not talking big, thick crap and sculpting and like just loads of Bondo and crap like this, but this can look fantastic. So I just want you guys to see that. I mean, look at that curve. That is straight up old school Italian supercar building right there. I mean, you guys are seeing this come to life right now. So I hope you guys are enjoying watching this. Let's find a new camera angle so you guys don't get bored. Okay. So, let's go cut the paper template for over there now. Just had a moment of being tired, you know what I'm saying? In the shop, grinding. Okay, so this template, okay, came from the other side. Now, if the wire form was identical, I should be able to put it on here and have it match. I don't think it will, because this is handmade and you know how that is. And that's where people would say, well, Casey, why don't you computer model this and 3D print it, or have a 5-axis mill, cut it out, and then make a composite thing? Okay, money and time. Both those things take a lot of time and cost a lot of money. And also, computers are not that, even if you're amazing at utilizing the computer to create the curves and everything in space, it'll never be as good as your finite ability to do it in real life, because I'm here, I can touch it, I can see it, I can instantly move it around and such. So I would rather prototype a car by hand, make it perfect, then 3D scan it and make it symmetrical and cut it out if you're gonna do a production run. But if you really want the art to be amazing and finitely, subtly perfect, that's why doing things by hand is still in so many ways better, faster, and cheaper. Okay, so let's see how reasonably close or not close. Oh dang, that's pretty good. Wow. I don't suck! Yes! Okay, so what I got, just masking tape, no big deal. And I'm gonna tape this thing up at the corner. Try to, right? And I'm gonna tape it part way. Now, when you cut out a template, it's tricky, but it's not. You really want it to match about right in the middle of the wire. You don't want it to overlap like that. You don't want there to be a gap, because a gap's, you know, you don't want to go trying to weld a gap. It's not that easy, especially when it's thin. So you want it to be just right at the middle, or slightly too big. If it's too big, I can trim it out with shears like we did over there with that real thin piece. Or if it's only just slightly too much, you can simply melt it when you go to actually weld it. So it's kind of one of those things with when you're hand making it. Okay, so that's off slightly, the curve of the wheel well, and it's a little fatter on this side by a lot. It's not really bad, honestly. Okay, so it's too big here. I could always cut that later if I cut out another one of these guys, but I would need to add material down here. So what I'm thinking is I'm just gonna cut this template out again. I'm gonna add metal to the bottom edge and a little bit to the front, and then I can just trim that. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Take this piece from the other side. Now this is not perfect, but I just held it in place and looked at it and memorized it, so that when I put this down on the steel, I can just draw what I saw. I wonder if it'll fit on this. Oh, it does. Holy crap. Look. So, okay, so this is the curve. I need it to be bigger, so I'm just gonna draw it. You guys can see what I'm doing here. I'm literally just gonna draw where I wanna cut it out like that. I'm gonna add a little material to the front. I don't really actually remember what it needed in the front, but I know that's enough. I could wear gloves, but I don't think I need them that bad. So, here we go. We're gonna use the shear. Now I'm gonna set it over here so I can rest on that. Oh, if anybody ever wonders, like, gosh, Casey, you really look like you work out. Do you work out? No, I work. That's why I'm skinny, because I, work. So anyway, throatless shear, I'm gonna be able to cut this curve out real nice. And it's kind of a funny curve, but it just cuts it like butter. So I'm gonna stick it in here. And actually, that's the side I'm gonna knock a little extra material off so I don't have to do it as bad when I go to cut it. So here we go. So I'm gonna use my waist. It's not as easy on this one. I'm trying to do this so you can see it on the camera. So I'm using my waist, like right at my belt line, to push on the metal, because I got, thick leather belt and this welding jacket on and stuff. So that's typically how I'll do it. You use your left hand to guide it left to right, and then you sort of push on it with your body. And then you just cut the metal. Now, this is a throatless shear, is what it's called. And you gotta mount it to a table. You can buy these for, I think, about $200, typically new. And they're really awesome. One thing you gotta do with them is you gotta keep these blades adjusted nicely. Maybe. It is a little big. Okay, well, it's good enough for now. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna take this and we're gonna roll it, and it's gonna go from being dead flat to having that nice crown. Because if I weld this whole car up where it was all dead flat, one thing, it's gonna warp, and it's gonna look like crap. And two, it's just gonna look stupid because it's not gonna have that beautiful subtle art and sweeping, gentle, delicate curves. It'll just look like a giant metal piece of origami, which could be cool, but in this sense, it needs to have the art. So I'm gonna write out on this. Now it's important to write outside because it would be easy to put it in the roller wrong and have it curved the wrong way, which I don't want to do. So now this roller is my best trick for the King Zero. Now the King Zero has very, very subtle compound curves. A compound curve is a sphere. It curves on two axes of varying rates, right? And a simple curve is something that curves on one axis. So for instance, this cylinder, this roller is a simple curve, has one, but a sphere is compound. So I need to put a compound curve in this. Now, you engineering types that are watching this are gonna say, well, Casey, if you use a roller with just this simple curve right here, it's only gonna roll it on a simple curve. You, sir, are thinking, well, but there's weird magic that's about to happen, and I wanna show you that. So here we go. I'm gonna roll it through this way to start. Actually, I'm gonna roll it through this way to start. Hold on. Let's go like this. Yes, okay. All right, so we're curving it, right? Look at that. Oh, it looks like a Pringles. Okay, so you can see we just gave it a simple curve. It's a little curvier here than there, so I'm gonna feed it through the other direction now, this way, which should help curve this last part a little bit more. But either way, it's starting to put in a simple curve that I need. Okay, so there's your simple curve, right? That's straight, but basically no curve on this angle, and that's not gonna fit. So what I found out is, if I run it through like this, you're gonna think, well, Casey is just gonna flatten it out and put a simple curve on another axis. Well, that's not how metal works. Metal's a lot like clay, and it sort of does some weird stretchy properties to it. So I'm gonna come back to it, and I'm gonna work it through on two different axes. Now, this wouldn't work for something that has a real steep curve, but for something that's super subtle in terms of the curve, like the King Zero, it'll go for it. So I'm gonna try it this way. Here we go. I hope I don't get overly distracted by the camera and screw this up. Okay, here we go. Not bad. Good. Okay, so I'm gonna run through this again. What I found is it'll end up giving itself its own gentle compound curve. It's real nice. Okay, so if you look at this, you're gonna see just a simple curve. However, if I take this now, let me run it through this one more time. Okay, one more time. All right, so if I take this now, it's soft metal. Now I'm gonna gently push it here, kind of flatten it out. Didn't do it enough. Okay, we're gonna run this through here now. Gonna run it through this way. Screw that. All right, so if I gently flatten out, I don't know if you can see this, but there is now a compound curve to it. You can see now, see this here? Look at that. That is a compound curve going on. It curves in all these directions. So I'm just gonna work it a little. Until it'll sit the way I want it to. Now it needs to relieve itself. Casey, your metal needs to pee? Yeah, that's exactly what it needs to do. It has to relieve itself, and it doesn't take me like one finger to hold this, okay? But it does want to pop. So if I tack this in place, it will hold the compound curve that I want, and as it heats up, it'll be nicer. And then as I gently start to tap it with the hammer to give it the full compound curve I want, it'll kind of relieve on its own. So I think we're gonna have to go that direction. It's sort of, this is where you get in the magic of metalworking. Also, don't work on sheet metal with your bare hands. I'm being pretty careful here. If I was just banging this out by myself, I'd have gloves on. Okay, so I think you guys, this is where I'm gonna end it today. We'll come back for next time, but that's my little secret that I just found out. This coach building project I'm doing with the King Zero is my first time doing this. And I chose to build a car like this because I felt that I would be able to be successful at it even for my first time and learn a lot to go into something a little more complicated. So one example, the reason I use steel is because all the metal in the car is the same. I can weld it all together. Whereas if I had aluminum body over a steel chassis or a steel buck frame, it's dissimilar metals and I would have to do different techniques. And also because this car is all about like, kind of like folded paper origami looking, and all the angles have to be exactly right. I wanted to do it where it had the steel wire at the edges and weld it and grind it and do it that way. So steel's the best thing for it. This does not weigh that much. And keep in mind, if this was made out of aluminum, I would have to make it out of thicker aluminum than the steel can be. The steel can be thinner. So while an aluminum body car would be a little bit lighter, I still think this car is gonna end up being well under 3,000 pounds, which is quite light, especially for a supercar. So don't freak out about that. But anyway, I hope this, guys, has inspired you to get your hands dirty and build your dreams, and I look forward to see you next time. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and naturally that you will subscribe, but please click that bell so I can continue to bring you wholesome and entertaining automotive content. Also, huge thanks to Avalon King ceramic coating. They're supporting this channel and making this all possible. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to using it on all of my vehicles, including my old dirt bike. Ceramic coating bonds directly to the surface of your paint, trim, and plastics to give a long-lasting shine that beats all waxes. It lasts for years and it's easy to maintain. I've got it on my Viper right now, and my car has never looked this good. So give them a try. Again, thanks for watching, and I look forward to see you next time.